Ruslan.
The reason why I'm making this video right now, because I strongly believe that if we, as the body of Christ, as the church, the capital C church, Christians, do not respond to these issues adequately, what's going to happen is people that are not Christians, or people that are far from God, or people that have opposite paradigms of the way we see the world will then take and lead in this area. And specifically, I'm talking about the shooting in Atlanta that happened across multiple massage therapists, spas. 6 women, primarily who were Asians, were killed, 8 total. This entire thing is heartbreaking. It's multi-layered. It's a whole lot to process. And I am extremely frustrated with how little the church wants to take responsibility for some of these things. Now, what am I talking about? I'm specifically talking about this person, I believe his name is Robert Long, is connection to an SBC church, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the biggest mainline Christian denomination. My good friend is a Southern Baptist pastor. He married me and my wife. They give a lot of money away to missions. And if you aren't keeping up in the SBC, there's been a massive exodus of all kinds of pastors, all kinds of leaders, and there's been issues in it. And so I know I'm connecting a lot. There's a lot going on here. There's the issue of violence against Asian Americans through the roof ever since the coronavirus. There's violence in general against women that have gone up. There's so many different layers to this. And again, I do not want to be complicit in a Christian culture that remains silent on this, because if we don't speak up, if we don't lead in this area, we relinquish the opportunity to lead, and then we have other people who lead. And this entire thing is just a hot mess, from the police officer mitigating the severity of what happened and said this man was just having a bad day, to the fact that he was on his way to Florida. But the thing that's most troubling to me is that this man was a member of a church. This man served in the church. And this man said that the reason why he committed these inexcusable, heinous acts was because he was cleansing the world of temptation. It came out today that he was a frequenter of some of these massage parlors, or maybe not a frequenter, but he had definitely been a guest before. So what connect the pieces, right? He was probably participating and going to these places for a sexual release. Oddly enough, in the same city where Ravi Zacharias was also committing some of these similar acts, right? Not obviously not the murder, but definitely going to massage parlors. All of this is very bizarre. The last year of these scandals with Christian leaders or people from the church repeatedly completely falling short, and the church more or less being silent of it, and more or less not taking any ownership. And so why am I talking about this? Now, obviously, this person was extremely troubled. Obviously, there's mental illness at play. Obviously, this isn't a theology thing, right? Like his theology was bad. But shout out to my man, Ambassador Deuce. He had a quote earlier this day, and he said, out of our doctrinal positions flows ethical well-being, right? Out of the positions that we have when we're looking at these different situations should create an ethical mindset in terms of how we engage these different things. And so I'm more concerned about the church remaining silent. I'm more concerned about the church more or less maybe creating the type of atmosphere where folks are stuck in shame, stuck in addiction, with no actual path to freedom in some of these areas. And so this person is dealing with sexual addiction, right? And participating and going to these parlors. And then the best way he thinks to mitigate this in his twisted mind is to then go back and commit the heinous acts of ending the lives of 8 people, right? This is beyond wild. This is beyond proper. the question that's coming up that I'm making the connection, and maybe I'm off, right? Maybe I'm off. Outside of the racial component, outside of the fact that this dude was a member of a church, outside of the mental health component, outside of everything else, the layered, is this idea that we're dealing with, and we've been dealing with purity culture. And what is purity culture? Purity culture goes back to stuff like I Kiss Dating Goodbye and that terrible book, and mainline pastors making statements like, when you're being promiscuous and you're giving yourself away, every time you give yourself away, it's a part of your soul, and then you have nothing left to give, and you can't walk in God's destiny for your life. Mega church pastors are saying this stuff. Right? This stuff is extremely toxic. It's extremely unhealthy. And so what's going to happen is, if we don't take inventory and provide ways for men and women of God to work in freedom, to walk in freedom, the world or the progressive church is going to take the lead on this, and they're going to say one of two things. They're going to say, hey, there's nothing wrong with premarital sex and doing what you will and following your sexual urges. Hey, the church is suppressive. That's not really God's standard, right? And they're going to dismiss it, and they're going to lead on this position because the church has more or less buried its head in the sand like a stinking ostrich and don't want to address the issues that are prevalent. And so, what is my assessment? I was hanging out with Chaz earlier, and we were having a conversation, and he made this statement about something totally unrelated. But he said, demanding without support. A demanding of a performance without the support and the standard, the layout, the method, the system, the practicality to live up to the standard, right? So demanding without the support. Purity culture has more or less created a demand on young people without giving them a practical support besides just pray it away, or just read Every Young Man's Battle, or just get accountability. And so we have a generation of people who are dealing with some serious anguish, dealing with some serious sexual addiction, dealing with some really serious inner turmoil. And the church has more or less not been very pragmatic in how it's been able to come alongside and help them. Now, there are some people that want to really sit and assess the roots of the issue and the society that this has created, and how women of color and Asian women have been really sexualized, hypersexualized, and become fetishes in a lot of ways. And all of that is true. And I don't have a problem with people wanting to have those conversations. We're going to have those conversations on the channel. But my hope is, can we dig beneath the surface, and can we say, no, God's standards aren't bad. God's word isn't bad. God's ways of doing things isn't bad. It's that the culture we've created around living out God's way has missed the mark on creating that support. It demands people a degree of performance that is very difficult in a society and a culture where most people aren't getting married until they're 30. So you got folks that are pushing marriage out further and further. You got folks that are completely leaving the church and just saying, forget it. I'm just going to cohabitate. I'm not going to be abstinent or to save myself for marriage, if you will. And so now, how do you expect people to not be able to deal with their sexuality and have ways to healthily process? And again, what's going to happen is we're going to have people lead on this topic, just like we saw on social issues, just like we saw on social injustice with police officers, that aren't going to be coming from a gospel-centered, Jesus-centered paradigm. And so some of you guys think that you're going to get saved and God's just going to wipe away all your earthly desires and all your passions and all those things that are kind of hardwired in some of us, right? Now, that this is not an excuse for sexual addiction. This is not an excuse about being a predator. I'm saying we as people have a natural desire to not be alone. We as people have a natural desire to not just want to be isolated. And oftentimes the church's solution is, hey, supernatural deliverance. We're just going to pray it away. We're going to lay hands, right? And we miss the very practical side that in my life, I didn't experience freedom from these other areas. I didn't experience freedom until I started seeking professional help, until I started looking at tools like psychology, like therapy, like fitness to get me out of this slump of being someone that had endured sexual trauma as a child, being a survivor of that, and then slowly turning the corner and moving into the opposite direction and experiencing true freedom from this stuff. And unfortunately, I didn't get a pragmatic support system from the local church initially. I didn't get any guys that were older, in their 30s, coming alongside of me and saying, hey, freedom is available. And you take that and you amplify it with someone that feels helpless, feels mastered by their addiction. You take that and you amplify it with someone that's isolated, who has some mental health issues going on, who's extremely troubled, and you get what we saw in Atlanta, and it's extremely tragic. But I feel like we have to take the responsibility and we have to lead on this. What am I saying? I'm saying, listen, everything that happens in my house isn't always my fault. Sometimes my son just misbehaves. Sometimes my wife is having a bad day. It's not always my fault. But as the head, as the provider, as the protector, it is my responsibility. It is my responsibility to lead. It is my responsibility to take ownership. It is my responsibility to have hard conversations. It is my responsibility to adjust and to redirect and to lead and to create better outlets and to create better systems so that the same thing doesn't keep happening. And we've had now a tumultuous year of numerous Christian after Christian after Christian with massive moral breakdown, with massive sexual sin, whether that's Ravi Zacharias, Carl Lentz, this new situation with Chris Hogan. This has been a year of a lot of folks getting exposed, and no one's connecting the dots that we have a culture that's not very pragmatic and helpful and useful on how people navigate this. So what is the solution? What is the solution? Okay, what is my solution? My solution is actually very simple, and you guys aren't gonna like it. Here's a big idea. I don't know if we were designed to not be sexually active until we were 25 or 30. I don't know if God designed us to sit around and be on a computer desk all day working away in front of a screen. I don't know if that's the way our bodies are designed. I know something definitely happens when young men hit puberty and that testosterone drops and that warrior-like attitude starts rising up. It's really bizarre. And so I think that there's something in our biology, and I think that there's something in what we are dealing with that's not just, hey, well, just wait. Well, just don't be like the world. You need to be sexually pure. Yeah, but you're not giving them any game. You're not giving them any practicality. You're not giving them any tools on how to step on the other side of this. And so now we have folks that are 25, 30, 35, 40 years old, never been married, don't have no relational skills, don't really have any outlets, don't know how to connect all of this, and we just have a complete breakdown of these situations, and it's heartbreaking. So what are some tools that I'm talking about? Well, hey, what if hypothetically, what if getting married at an earlier age, like I did, I was 23, my wife was 21, what if that wasn't as taboo? I'll go deeper. Hey, what if, I'm looking in the wrong camera, gosh darn it. That was terrible. What if getting married at a young age wasn't as taboo? What if we created a society where kids didn't graduate at 18 and go to college and get into massive amount of debt, right? Instead, we empowered young people to become entrepreneurial, to start businesses, to learn how to earn, to learn how to be providers, so that they can get married younger, so that they didn't have to go into their mid-20s in debt, trying to maintain a demanding standard that they don't have support or practical tools to, and struggling their entire life and then feeling completely hopeless because they feel like they don't have any control over what their body may be naturally designed to do, which is be in a covenantal marriage much earlier than our society has forced. And now you have cohabitating on the rise. You have Christians cohabitating, not understanding that, hey, if you look at the number and the statistics of folks who live together before marriage, those couples are actually more likely to never get married, and those folks are actually more likely to get divorced after getting married. Hey, but that's the world's wisdom, right? Try it before you buy it. Make sure you could take the car for a test drive. Why would you just wait until you're married to be intimate and in covenant relationship and union? Why not just try it before you buy it? And we've seen that proves false. So where are we as a society with this whole thing? And it's a multi-layered issue. And so my solution, my heart, is I want to empower young people to understand that the version of you from 10 years in the future is counting on the 20-year-old version of you to make better decisions. It's counting on you to not get into massive amount of debts. It's counting on you to develop useful skills so that you could earn an income, so that you could provide and protect the family earlier than when society tells you, because now the adolescence is, well, that's extended into your 30s. You could live at your mom's house well into your 30s and it's totally accepted. This is a cultural systemic issue that isn't getting addressed. And again, the church, when this stuff happens, nobody wants to address the stuff that's happening with purity culture. Nobody wants to address the stuff that's happening with young men not having outlets, not knowing how that they could actually have freedom in these different areas. We're just burying our head in the sand like an ostrich and hoping that these things don't come home and affect us personally. Well, now they have. Now we have 8 people dead. We have 6 of them who are Asian women. We have violence on the rise. We have violence against women on the rise. Women are now demoralized and viewed as sexual objects and weapons of the devil's, weapons of temptation. That's not a woman's fault to help you be pure. No, you be pure because you have your house in order and you have a heart that's in the right place with God and you have outlets and you lean into therapy and you lean into tools because, hey, by the way, all truth is God's truth, meaning if there's truth in therapy or psychology, that's still God's truth. If there's truth in fitness and health and changing your diet and changing your sleeping pattern, that's God's truth. And instead, we want to otherize, we want to demonize, or worse, we want to gaslight and act like this isn't an issue. Well, guess what? It is an issue. And as long as I have any degree of influence, as long as I have any degree of platform, I'm not going to bury my head in the sand and act like this is some isolated situation that's not connected to the greater issues we're facing in the body of Christ today. I'm not going to do that. You could do that, and you could be mad at me for speaking up and saying, hey, this isn't a one-off. There's a pattern here. This is all connected to me. The Ravi situation, all of these things are connected. They're not isolated, guys. They're connected. There's an issue happening with sexuality in the church and not knowing how to process, how to get help, how to confess sin, how to be honest, how to be transparent, how to get support to live up to the standards of God. And so I don't know, maybe I'm wrong in this area. Maybe I'm connecting the dots a little bit too much, but you know what I'm not wrong about is if you're under the age of 25, you getting your house in order. If you're under the age of 30, you not waiting and living on standards that are extremely difficult for you from a physiological standpoint, let alone an emotional desire to connect with people. This stuff is extremely frustrating, and no one talked to me about this when I was 17, 18 years old and told me, hey man, the decisions you make at 17, 18 are gonna affect you at 27 and 28. No one ever told me these things because it was just like, we're just gonna wage war on the enemy and we're just gonna pray it away. And it's like, bruh, I got this thing called testosterone, and I got this thing that it just doesn't feel like I can control. How do I deal with it? How do I balance out my dopamine levels? How do I control my cortisol levels so I don't need no one told me this kind of stuff. And so listen, nothing's in a vacuum. Everything is connected. The decisions you're making, and I'm not saying everybody who's dealing with lust is gonna go on and kill women. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this stuff is connected, and if we don't get a hold of it, if we don't deal with it, if we don't be intentional on waging war on sin, not just from a hyper spiritual side, but from a pragmatic side, how is your sleeping? What kind of useful skills are you developing? Are you going outside and getting vitamin D? Are you active or are you sitting all day? What does your day-to-day life look like? Do you have an outlet? Do you have a place where you can safely confess sin? Are you in a local church? Where are you at with all this stuff? Do you need to go to therapy? Are you a survivor of sexual trauma, sexual abuse as a kid, and you've never dealt with it? Guess what? That's going to rear its head at some point in your life. Might as well deal with it now. Hey, if you don't feel like you need to deal with it, why not deal with it preemptively? Why not address it before it becomes a big issue and then you can't control your sexual urges? These are very pragmatic things that, unfortunately, guess what? The world is leading on right now. The world is leading on things that we have solutions to. The scriptures say to confess your sins. The scriptures talks that, hey, if a man not work, he ought not eat. How many of us are actually working? How many of us are actually active? How many of us are actually pressing into the pragmatic side of being a follower of Jesus? No, we just want to talk about abstract theology and how, ideas that don't force us to do anything and just these pleasantries that make us feel better about ourselves in the moment. And it's an emotional high in the moment. It's a dopamine high in the moment, but it doesn't create any lasting change. It's a form of godliness without the power of godliness. And guess what? The scriptures tell us to work out our salvation with fear and trembling. That means that we got some work to do. That means that if you're watching this and you're going through, this is not me casting judgment on you. This is not me telling you you're some terrible sinner. On the contrary, this is me saying that Jesus lived the life that you couldn't live, and that no degree of performance will earn your way to God or make you any more righteous in God's eyes. But because Jesus did it all, we now do have a response to live holy lives, to live set apart lives, to live lives where we need to align ourselves with the ways of God. And that is a holistic, transformative process that requires us to respond accordingly. So those are my thoughts on the issue. Let me know if I'm bugging. Let me know if you guys think I've just completely lost my mind and I'm not looking at this from a sober perspective. I think it's all connected. I don't think any of this stuff happens in a vacuum. And I think that we've created a purity culture in the evangelical church, an evangelical culture where we demand certain expectations without providing the healthy support systems to help people flourish in these areas. And I want to see you guys flourish. I want to see you guys flourish in your finances. I want to see you guys flourish in your sexuality. I want to see you guys flourish in your marriages. I want to see you guys flourish in your local churches. I want to see you guys live in the freedom that I didn't even know was available to me at 20 years old. I thought this was just a cross that I had to bear. I thought this was the thorn in my flesh that I was stuck with because nobody ever sat me down and said, there's another way here, bro. You don't have to keep doing this thing. You know what? If you change your sleeping, if you change your eating, if you adjust some of these other things and you get your dopamine levels in check and your biology and your physiology in check, it'll actually be much easier. Oh, and by the way, you might want to start developing useful skills so that you can earn more money, so that you can get married younger, so that you don't go into student loan debt chasing some stupid degree that's not even going to give you ROI on your time. I'm venting. Forgive me. Those are my thoughts. What y'all think about this?
Kingstream Entertainment. Ruslan.
Joshua the King came down and bore it all. Yeah. Conversations front of the fireplace. All of my mistakes, how do I erase? Wanna operate at a higher pace. Birth pains causing the body to dilate on the first name, baby.